welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. For today's video, I wanted to talk about note-taking in law school, because I think it's a very popular question that gets asked by law students, including myself when I started, the question of whether or not to do handwritten notes or to type up their notes, like their class notes. It really depends on the person. There's no kind of uniform way to do it. I personally type my notes. I find I type a lot faster than I write, so to me it just makes sense, because there are some classes where you're sitting there frantically trying to type all of the notes down and everything that the professor is saying, especially if there's also a PowerPoint. Then you have to kind of take notes from the PowerPoint and also from what the professor is saying. So I find it the best to type my notes because I can just type faster. It is recommended often by a lot of professors to handwrite your notes, just because then you're not writing every single thing down that the professor says. You're only taking down the important stuff. And I do get that, because I do often find myself writing down literally everything, but I just don't find that it makes the most sense for me. The other thing too is, so in law school, I don't know if you have ever heard of these before, but they're called summaries. You use them for exams. So you will make a summary of all of your notes and you bring that with you into the exam, because most exams in law school are open book. So for me, I don't want to have to, at the end of the semester, go through and type up all of those notes that I hand wrote throughout the semester. I would rather have them all typed already. So what I did in the winter semester this past year is I typed up all of my notes into one document. So like for my torts class, I would have written all of my notes into one document. And then at the end of the semester, when I'm preparing for exams, once all of the new content has been covered, I go through and take out, like delete all of the unnecessary information that I don't need. So things that I wrote down to remember later, or maybe concepts that I was confused about that I now understand, or just things that I repeated many times. That just works better for me. The other thing too is I don't typically, I think to an extent I would probably learn a little bit if I were to rewrite my notes. I know a lot of people learn by rewriting. I don't find it the most effective. The way that I typically study is by rereading everything over and over again. And I typically read it out loud to myself, and I kind of like talk through it with myself. Just find that the most effective. For me, it's more effective than rewriting my notes. But if you are someone who learns well from rewriting their notes, then it could be a good idea to handwrite your notes and then maybe type them up at the end of the semester and use that as a way of studying. There are people that do handwrite their notes and they find that the most effective. And it does help for making sure that you're only writing down the important things. But the trick that I use typically is I do my best to not write everything verbatim, because it's not that helpful when you're studying. You just end up with so many notes that it's just ridiculous. But if there is a particular concept or a topic that I don't really understand that well, or I don't understand how the professor is explaining it, I often will type what they're saying word for word. I will then go back and reread what I wrote, and because it's the way that the professor explained it word for word, sometimes when I look back at it later it makes sense, but I find often it kind of helps for those confusing topics, because there are certain times when I write brief notes and then I go back later to read it and I'm like, what the heck was that supposed to mean? So I would say for taking notes, it really depends on your style. I personally just like typing because I type a lot faster, and it just makes for easy summary making at the end of the semester. I also type my notes when I take notes from my readings. So you have a lot of readings to do in law school before class. The thing that I did for the winter semester that I found the most effective is I would type all of my notes that I would do on the readings. So the notes that I would prepare before class, I would type those all in a different colored font, so like red. and then I would type all of my class notes in black. Because one of the confusing things about law is that often things change from the textbook that you're reading. Maybe the law is updated in that area since the book was written, or sometimes professors will have you read old cases with old law that doesn't apply anymore, just to help you understand how the law has evolved to where it is now. Which means, though, if you're a little bit confused about it, or when you're first starting out reading the cases, it gets really confusing. Like, you're not sure because you're reading stuff that doesn't apply anymore, and then in class your professor's saying something different and you're like, which is right? Because they're saying two completely different things. So the thing that I found that was helpful was I would type my notes in a different color, and that way when I went to class I knew what the professor had told me because it was in black. And then I would kind of cross-reference it and say, okay, the case said this, but my professor said this. So most likely on an exam, he or she is going to grade me based on what they said in class. So then I don't get that confusion, because the last thing you want is to type your notes from the readings that are actually bad law, and then to incorporate that into your summary thinking that it's correct, thinking that it still applies, and it doesn't. So I just found using two different colored fonts was very helpful for when I was trying to learn the cases and learn the concepts. It was much more effective for me to have two different colored fonts to be able to distinguish between what I wrote and my notes and what I thought and what the professor then said. So in terms of whether or not to handwrite or type your notes, it kind of depends on your preference, the best way that you study and understand things. So yeah, you just have to kind of find what works for you. I found second semester I did things a little bit differently, like the two different colored fonts and putting everything into one document. I did that a little bit differently second semester because from first semester you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. Don't be afraid to go into law school not knowing the exact way that you want to do it. Feel free to experiment and try note-taking by hand first, and then maybe typing, or if you just know you're better at handwriting, then do that. I know a lot of people that handwrite their notes and a lot of people that type them. You can't go wrong either way. So that is everything for today's video. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I will try to answer those for you. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, then give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!